Hello, and welcome to today's program. We have an exciting and full agenda, so without further delay, please welcome Bob Bradway.
Well, thank you. And hello, everyone. I'm delighted as chairman of the CEO Roundtable on Cancer to welcome all of you to this year's conference. For as long as I've been involved in the CEO Roundtable on Cancer, I've looked forward to participating in this annual meeting in person. But of course, unfortunately, this year, COVID-19 had other ideas for all of us. Nonetheless, I'm delighted so many of you have been able to join us. And I want to just take a moment to recognize a couple of special guests in particular who are with us today. First, Duke's Mike Krzyzewski, our longtime friend, longtime advocate for the CEO Roundtable and for cancer care and cancer wellness across the United States. So Coach K, it's wonderful to have you here. And I will wear this Duke 2015 National Championship hat through any session when I'm not on camera during the course of the conference today. And it's also a great pleasure, in addition to Coach K, for us to welcome Secretary Andy Card, who's the interim president of the George and Barbara Bush Foundation, and of course is a former secretary and chief of staff and public servant who served in 3 different presidential administrations. So it's a great pleasure to have him with us, and we'll have an opportunity to hear from him a little later in our program. And of course, amid all the uncertainty and disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, some things have remained the same. And one of them, sadly, is that cancer never takes a day off. And that means the mission of this organization remains as important as ever. And although since early this year, the world has been properly focused on COVID-19, we can't let the distraction of the pandemic get us to take our eyes off the unacceptable toll in terms of death, pain, and suffering that's caused by cancer. I think all of us on this call are painfully aware of the scale and scope and the challenge posed by cancer in all of its forms and variety. In the US alone, more than 1.7 million people receive a new cancer diagnosis every year. And unfortunately, more than 600,000 of those lose their lives due to cancer each year. So clearly, as a society, we need to do a better job of helping people recognize and avoid the behaviors and other risk factors that can result in cancer. We need to get better at detecting and diagnosing cancer as early as possible. We need to improve the care provided to people living with cancer. Many cancers are highly curable. If we catch them early enough and treat them appropriately, that's an ambition that we should have for more and more of those 1.7 million who receive a cancer diagnosis every year. So employers in general, and CEOs in particular, have an important role to play in the effort of trying to diagnose and treat cancer appropriately. And so with a focus on what more we need to do, let me turn over to our new CEO of the CEO Roundtable, Andy Crichton, and ask him to share his thoughts with all of us this morning. Andy, welcome aboard, and over to you.
Thank you, Chairman Bradway. And I want to thank everyone for attending today's annual meeting. All I can say is this is not like any annual meeting the CEO Roundtable on Cancer has had before. I had the privilege of attending last year's annual meeting at the SAS headquarters. The first thing I'd like to do is personally thank Dr. Jim Goodnight, SAS, and the team here at the executive briefing session for being able to pivot so quickly to move from an on-site event to a virtual event. It's been wonderful working with them. As we go through today, there's a question and answer tab at the bottom. So if you have any questions as we're presenting, submit those. And if we don't get to all those, we will email back to you too. I'm honored to lead such an organization with a strong history of being a change agent. The organization is the result of vision and hard work by our founder, President George H.W. Bush, the founding chair, Bob Ingram, and subsequent chairs, Bill Weldon, Chris Wiebacher, and currently Bob Bradway. We can't forget the person who shepherded us through this organization from the beginning, and that's the CEO, Dr. Marty Murphy. As Marty is reminding us, the direction of our founder, President George H.W. Bush, is to be bold and venturesome. Our founder had the vision to create an organization comprised of action-oriented chief executive officers and challenge them to do something more about cancer, prevention, diagnosis, and treatment, not only within their own family, but their corporate family too. Well, I want to tell you today, we are ready to take that challenge a few steps further. You'll hear today from the leadership, Mary Liz Rich, who will cover our refresh of the gold standard, and Bill Louv, who will give an update of the progress, and there is progress, Project DataSphere has made in the past year. So first, I want to share with you an overview of our membership. We're at 36 members, which is the same as 2019. However, we have 5 new members as of this year. Menarini Group, Beijing, Daiichi Sankyo, Foundation Medicine, Alphanumeric Systems. And welcome, and we look forward to working with you in partnership and to really delivering on our mission. So as we talk about membership, I want to share some thoughts with you too. As we need to broaden our membership to include other sectors. We're very heavy in the life science sector, but we're going to focus on financial, insurance, and technology sectors, but we really see our expanded focus in health and well-being attracting other sectors as we move forward. The Life Science Consortium is a board advisory committee established in 2005. We can engage members and thought leaders by refreshing the Life Science Consortium through working groups to address important issues of the day, such as data sharing and clinical trial diversity. The Gold Standard is our premier program for the CEO Roundtable, and we need to ensure we remain to date with new directions. Therefore, we're establishing a Gold Standard Council as another advisory committee to the board. Personally, my tenure as Chief Medical Officer of Prudential Financial in Newark, New Jersey, I've been involved in activities to address health equity. We know an organization with action-oriented leaders can make this happen much quicker. Our focus on health and well-being, as well as interested partners to bring this holistic view of health to communities such as historically black colleges and universities can be a catalyst to make this happen. Sorry. When we talk about accreditation, and we are refreshing the gold standard accreditation, I have this, accreditation is transformative. So what do I mean by that? When I joined the organization, I wondered why this was an accreditation and not an award. And after further investigation and discussion, I came to the realization that the word accreditation is very important to deliver on the mission. Awards are given for a point in time. A change in leadership in an organization can change the policies, practices, and strategy from that time that the award was given. An accreditation, on the other hand, is earned and must be maintained. Therefore, you can be assured a gold standard company still has the practices, policies, in place even with a change in leadership. So with the gold standard, what are we doing? Well, we're really expanding the focus on health to include well-being. This holistic view of health has a broader appeal than just wellness. What do we mean when we say well-being? Well, the definition I like to use, it's how people think, feel, and function on a personal and social level and how they evaluate life. Organizations can have a positive or negative impact on an individual's well-being. Individuals with a strong sense of well-being are better able to withstand critical issues such as a cancer diagnosis. Therefore, it's important to build this into our gold standard to help companies move forward. This will include financial, social, spiritual purpose together, mental and emotional aspects, as well as environmental health components as a new pillar. Another key component of addressing holistic view of health is through health equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's all easy to say that my employees have health insurance, but it's the next step in the grand challenge to critically look at whether these health benefits are being used in the best interest of the individual. The great strides in cancer treatment has made survivorship an important aspect as how we address cancer. We need to show the way organizations can readily accommodate the cancer survivor back into the workplace, but we also need to ensure the support related to long-term consequences of cancer treatment, such as fertility issues, are brought to the forefront. Project DataSphere has taken a role as convener, collaborator, and catalyst. Launched in 2014, Project DataSphere is moving forward in that bold and venturesome path. Are making great strides in delivering results. Conversations with our academic partners where they have expressed great improvement in engagement and progress in the research programs over the past year. This has led to clarity of where we need to focus our resources as well as build continuity with our relationships. Data sharing includes platform development and ensuring the data is being used, not just sitting on the platform. We need to broaden our view of how we look at data and be able to incorporate new data under a firewall for a short period of time, but then continue to look to put it into the open platform. Our research programs are evolving and becoming more mature. We are engaged with the academic, regulatory, and industry community to make sure the efforts will continue to support the mission to be the catalyst to discover new treatments while helping to make cancer trials faster, more effective, and less expensive. In summary, it's been a unique and challenging year for all of us, but we continue to make great strides because of dedicated staff, great partnerships, and superb volunteers. I don't know where we would be without the support, but I want to recognize the co-chairs moving us in the right direction. The Gold Standard Council, which is newly formed, is co-chaired by Dr. Marcelo Targino from J&J, Dr. David Shepperly with BMS, and then the Life Science Consortium still is co-chaired by Dr. David Reese from Amgen and Dr. Mace Rothenberg from Pfizer. I want to thank them all for their time and their guidance, and just a heads up, we'll be reaching out to you more frequently now that we've acknowledged you. So I really appreciate all the help you've given. So now I would like to introduce Mary Liz Rich, our president of Gold Standard, to share the future direction of Gold Standard accreditation. Mary Liz.
Good morning, and thank you, Dr. Crichton. Nice tee up for all of what I'm going to be sharing today, so I appreciate that. I want to start out here first with some recognition. One, Bristol Myers Squibb had the phenomenal achievement at the closeout of 2019 in becoming global gold standard. We publicly announced that in 2020. Again, huge accolade out to CEO Dr. Giovanni Caforio in leading that charge and leading that effort within Bristol Myers Squibb, his incredible work there and his commitment to healthy communities, healthy environment for his employees, and continuing to move forward the gold standard where BMS is represented in the communities where they live, work, and play. We also had joining this year our gold standard companies, member companies. In the midst of a pandemic, I'll add, that's amazing that these companies were able to achieve this esteemed accreditation, be it Anne Arundel, just outside of Baltimore, High Point University in High Point, North Carolina, Huntsman Cancer Center located in Salt Lake City, and Memorial Hermann in Houston, Texas. We applaud all of their efforts, welcome them to the Gold Standard member accreditation, and we certainly applaud all of their efforts in this fine achievement. So today I want to speak with you a little bit about the gold standard, where we have headed with the update. Dr. Crichton teed us up, and I just want to frame it up again on, we've been having the opportunity this year, amidst a pandemic, as we all have, to step back and look at where we're going with the gold standard, how it can remain relevant, become and continue the cornerstone that it is for the CEO Roundtable, which began in 2006, the gold standard did, but it does provide a framework for employers to build a healthier workplace by focusing on cancer, risk reduction, early detection, access to quality care, certainly health equity, and high-quality clinical trials. It continues to affect more than 7 million lives through more than 200 employers who have earned accreditation since 2006, and we continue to focus on 5 critical areas that we will review, which have become part of the refresh area for our organization. I also want to recognize, just as Dr. Crichton did, a little bit more expansion here. As part of the refresh, we deployed a Gold Standard Advisory Council, which have guided us through our refresh since the beginning, and that's Dr. David Shepperly of Bristol-Myers Squibb and Dr. Marcelo Targino of Johnson & Johnson as both their co-chairs, but also adding to that esteem Ron Getzel, Senior Scientist, Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, Dr. Michelle Bennett, Director of NCI, and Dr. Otis Brawley, Distinguished Professor of Johns Hopkins. Both Dr. Getzel and Dr. Brawley will be joining us later today in our breakouts as we develop on more of the well-being side as well as diversity partnerships. The gold standard still stands for quality care and continuing to focus on the power of prevention. So through this refresh, we have continued to focus our pillars on that power of prevention. Cancer is way too common today, even still, and we know it's the second most common cause of death in the U.S., accounting for nearly 1 in 4 deaths. And also the gold standard continues to escalate the focus on the escalating cost of cancer care, which has now hit the $173 billion mark. Our gold standard is well positioned to continue to address all of those areas, both taking forward our framework of the gold standard and then accelerating that into our new structure. So I'm not going to go through this verbatim here because I'm pretty certain that everyone can read fairly well. So the old structure, we're actually just taking what has already been there, has been our cornerstone of health for the gold standard, and just expanding it, kind of reordering and shifting things a bit. We've actually created 2 pillars, 2 bookends, if you will. Bookend 1 will be health education and navigation, and then bookend 5 will be well-being, as Dr. Crichton brought to your attention, and that is a completely new pillar to the enterprise. Then there will also be 3 additional pillars that are carry forward: prevention and early detection, advancing treatment, and survivorship. To call out those a little more directly, the health education and navigation, that will continue to help employees to navigate the healthcare landscape, provide resources for employees to locate and access healthcare. Prevention and early detection, that will continue to carry forward both smoke-free working place as well as tobacco cessation, tobacco-free workplace, as well as expand and include screenings for new indications such as lung, prostate, skin, and genetic screening. Advancing treatment, this will also include clinical trials. So we didn't drop that, we just dropped that off of the actual category, but the advancing treatment will incorporate that clinical trial access as well as second opinion cancer diagnoses and biomarker testing. Survivorship, a clear definition. Dr. Brawley actually asked us to make sure that we relayed this definition of survivorship for the Cancer Gold Standard, which is certainly something very valuable that many enterprises do not do. But survivorship, by our definition, is once a survivor, always a survivor. So within the workforce, within our Gold Standard workforce, definitely our companies deem and support survivorship throughout a person's employment with that company. And then also well-being. As I mentioned, well-being is the new pillar, and that will definitely be focusing on other determinants of health, but they also within the context of cancer prevention, treatment, and survivorship. It will incorporate such components as spiritual purpose, engagement in community, as well as financial health and mental health. All of things that are impacted through cancer diagnoses. Part of refreshing the gold standard was also raising the gold standard, and we dialed in a little bit more deeply, as I mentioned, with the survivorship piece, and definitely making sure that that was emerging treatments are improved and certainly prolonging those lives. Health equity, a huge component, and will be intentionally incorporated into each of our pillars, as well as just an overarching, but definitely health equity, considering the diversity and being inclusive in all areas of both preventing cancer, treating cancer, surviving cancer, and also families living with cancer. Well-being. Certainly timing is everything, and well-being is a high focus of all companies today, especially with events like COVID and the pandemic. It only highlights the importance of a well-being workforce, a focus on well-being and resilience. And then also the final piece, the linchpin, if you will, of the gold standard is actually a big push around advancing the technology framework around the gold standard implementation and accreditation process. This technology will certainly improve the application process, but it will also build and share data for benchmarking industry and the size of company, while also supporting corporate sustainability and helping companies better their best. So health equity, as I mentioned, was a huge component of our overlay into the gold standard, and that is part of the inspiration for the Going for Gold HBCU initiative. That's historically Black colleges and universities. Whenever we began this refresh back in February, essentially, we began the refresh back in February and looking at what were the gaps that the gold standard could ultimately help to bridge and help to grow and help to stimulate those 200 companies that have already achieved gold standard accreditation, really activating within those communities and becoming not just an accreditation process for a company, but actually an activation grassroots lift. That's what brought us to discussion around historically Black colleges and universities, because we know health equity is a social justice issue that significantly impacts cancer survival. And Dr. Martin Luther King said it best: of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and the most inhuman because it often results in physical death. Later today, you'll actually be treated with a video that Dr. Crichton will be able to introduce. He was supposed to be here live, but a friend of Dr. Martin Luther King's, a civil rights activist, Dr. Robert, we know him affectionately as Dr. Bob Brown, will be sharing with us some time, but he will also be serving as an ambassador to our HBCUs, as he too is a graduate of there, but it's also a very area that's very passionate and near and dear to his heart. And as I said too, he worked right alongside Dr. Martin Luther King. In today's breakout session, you're going to be hearing from Dr. Brawley, which will actually provide greater and broader detail around the importance of addressing this burden of cancer in areas of disparities. And cancer discriminants are certainly guiding us through this area of focus for us with historically Black colleges and universities. Because that would be what one of your questions might be is, why historically Black colleges and universities? Why are we focusing on HBCUs? One, we know it is definitely a gap. But also, two, there's messaging. There's communication and messaging and trust. If you look at historically Black colleges and universities, I'm going to shorten that to HBCUs because I am on a time limit. So, but if you look at first generation college, 30% of all HBCU students entering into their freshman year come from first generation college. That's a huge opportunity as these students enter college, as they're receiving many modules. It might be around sexual harassment. It might be around substance abuse. It might be about mental health disorders. Very few, if any at all, across all colleges, not just HBCUs, but we know that HBCUs can deliver a message there through modules of health, modules of prevention, module of access to care, modules around education for each of those areas. So HBCUs cultivate, we know, dynamic communities. They have a tremendous commitment to the entire university family, be that employees, students, alumni, family, and the community are all highly valued within the HBCU family. We also know that this will foster partnership and outreach between our corporations that we partner with and HBCUs and corporations, as well as the communities in which these HBCUs are. So this is an extension, just let me flip back. This is an extension of our gold standard. It's taking our gold standard pillars, making them active and living within the HBCU setting. So now it's not just applicable to the employee, it's applicable to the student. It's applicable to the student family. It's applicable to the community where that HBCU is. And if you're familiar with HBCUs, they are largely placed, there are 107 of them nationwide, and they are largely placed along the southern corridor of the United States, up through the East Coast, up to Baltimore area, which that southern space is really the cancer belt. You have late stage diagnosis. Many of the students that are coming into HBCUs, I think it's 80%, are coming less than 100 miles away from home. So their ability to navigate to their new school of choice, learn something that's applicable to their mom, their grandmother, their father, their sibling, that information will be shared if they know it can save a family member's life. So why the CEO Roundtable? Why is the CEO Roundtable investing in this project? One, it's a needed gap. It's a messaging. The CEO Roundtable is equipped and positioned to do this because of our gold standard, because of the gold standard framework. Corporations have high impact and can impact social change. We know corporations care about where they reside, where their communities are, and where they work. Education through the workplace is a structured way of being able to communicate, and health is a corporate priority for each and every one of our members of the CEO Roundtable. Also, this provides an opportunity to, again, activate from the corporate side to the community the gold standard, and they can do that through ambassadors in the workplace, ambassadors back to the universities, in hopes actually that are actually ambassadors going back to their own alma mater. So the opportunity is, this is a grassroots movement. It can create and will create communication and education around cancer prevention, early detection, access to treatment, and clinical trials. In fact, as part of how we've been synthesizing this and socializing this with our member companies, there have been board an idea, and we're planning to implement that, and that is somewhat of a clinical trial innovation hub that will be led in concert and derived and directed through our life sciences consortium model, and that will be a very exciting opportunity to lift and elevate clinical trial participation, but more importantly, clinical trial education and access. One of the biggest barriers is the education piece around clinical trials to this particular demographic, as well as the access to clinical trials. So the integration of the gold standard deliverables into the HBCU community will become a leading element that will foster engagement through the university and the company ambassadors, as well as our CEOs together and the leadership of the university. So what's our vision for success? How are we going to measure success? How will we determine when we are successful? So we're going to have to get out of the ground. We're planning to actually roll this out top of Q1, but not with all 107 HBCUs. We're actually going to start with 10, and then by Q3, we'll be launching in. So by the end of Q4, 2021, we will actually have, I just made up a quarter if you didn't notice. By the end of Q4, we will actually have 25 HBCUs in the queue with the intention of rolling this out to all HBCUs over a 4-year time period. It will take each HBCU approximately 3 years to go gold with us and help their communities go gold as well. So if you think about how that works over time, that has the impact of actually directly impacting 2.5 million lives. we anticipate that that number is more than double whenever you think about the messaging, the reach, the trust factor within the communities in which these HBCUs serve and where they reside. This will certainly strengthen community partnerships while ultimately leading to healthier employers, healthier also communities. We will also be able to expand our vision through treatment access and prevention through education, and we will certainly reduce health disparities by serving HBCUs. So this happens only in partnership. While the CEO Roundtable can serve as a hub, we are technically the convener. We're the convener of both our members coming together as well as community, as well as the networks of influencers that are out there through civic clubs, college coaches, government agencies, philanthropists, coalitions, chambers of commerce, the National Urban League, the President's Cancer Panel. We look forward to all of these different enterprises stepping up and partnering with us, partnering with you, because we know together we can change the course of a generation. I'm going to now pass the baton to Bill Liu, President of Project DataSphere.
All right, thanks, Mary Liz, and thanks for the opportunity to review Project DataSphere for you. Give you obviously the short version, 10-minute version. We've had a lot of success over the last year and some exciting things in the year to come. I'll start with the metrics that we show the annual meeting each year on how the data sharing platform is progressing. And if from this chart, you'll see that we're making steady progress on getting more data sets and more data on the platform. The usage of that information from investigators is increasing. And our primary sort of outcome variable of productivity is the number of peer-reviewed journal articles. And that's not a typo. It does say 87, and that's a combination of steady growth in the number of publications that we have and also our improved searching methods so that we now have an accurate inventory of the number of peer-reviewed publications. And now we can go back and see we've been adding 20 per year for the last 3 years. So so this is really dramatic evidence for those of you who are not spend a lot of your time in the data sharing community. That's a dramatic number. It demonstrates that open sharing is a very effective model. Okay, it's a very important model. It also shows you that our collaboration and partnership with SAS has been very productive. They've been our partners in this from the beginning. Now, there are some headwinds here with increased concern about privacy, about increased concern about IP, about increased concern about the cost of de-identifying data sets and providing them for sharing. We see some of our data providers becoming more reticent about sharing data sets, sharing patient-level data. So what are we going to do about that? One is we need to continue to do the things that we do, but do them better. So, for example, we need to leverage the Life Sciences Consortium. Andy just spoke about revitalizing that group. Andy suggested, and I hope by me saying it now, it has to come true, that the first new working group from the LSC will be about data sharing. We need to work with our membership more effectively to keep that flow of information going onto the platform. Now, again, I want to say this as clearly as I can. Project DataSphere is unique. We provide patient-level data in an open science platform. That is unique. The other platforms have accomplished great transparency and discoverability by bringing together metadata for most of the clinical trials that are sponsored in the country right now by pharma and by government agencies. But there's quite a path from discoverability via metadata to actually acquiring or getting permission to use the patient-level data. It's a very long and arduous path. So we are unique, and what we want to do is exert or take a leadership position in that community of data sharing platforms and services and move the goalpost from discoverability to effective reuse of data. And there's a breakout session this afternoon at 2:30 on this. We have a couple of great speakers, and they will go into more detail on this. 2.5 years ago, we started a portfolio of research programs to complement the data sharing platform. I'll give you a couple highlights here. Registries. We are now accruing Merkel cell carcinoma patients, a rare dermatologic cancer, from multiple academic centers. And the idea here is to create a big data opportunity to be able to understand Merkel cell in a way that you can't by just looking at one center. And that same pattern is something that we're applying in other registries. One is to develop a tumor agnostic registry based on genetic alterations. We're starting with MET. Another place is to build a big data set by going across multiple institutions of rare adverse events that occur in patients receiving immune therapy. And one thing we can see from our experience so far is that to make this sustainable, we're going to have to bring more automation to the curation of these data sets. Another one of our programs is the External Control Arm program. The premise here is to use historical data to create synthetic control arms to reduce the number of patients that are randomized to standard therapy rather than being put on the innovative therapy. The first external control arm we worked out was for small cell lung cancer. That publication is about to come out. We're now working with the neuro-oncologists at Dana-Farber to build an external control arm for glioblastoma. And also, we've gotten a lot more interest in this program since we've broadened our target to help at all stages of the clinical development program. Okay, so it helps in planning, it helps in deciding that big decision between phase 2 and phase 3 and so forth. It's not just about trying to remove randomized control arms from late-stage clinical trials. And then we have images and algorithms. The idea here is to apply augmented intelligence, that's my definition of AI rather than artificial intelligence, but augmented intelligence, we're augmenting radiologists here, in the measurement of tumor progression in clinical trials. And the first phase of this, we're collaborating with Columbia University, which arguably has the best, most renowned group of radiologists, AI people, and oncologists working in this area. And we've been able to get our hands on lots of data, and we now have radiologists annotating the lesions on very large data sets of cancer patients who have gone through clinical trials. So these are the training sets for a machine learning algorithm. And by the end of phase 1, we will have annotated the small mountain of data, and we will also have worked out the AI for liver. We need a phase 2. We need to complete that across the other tumor sites and then integrate them into what we call auto-resist. So an automation of the current protocol for how tumor progression is measured in cancer patients. This is going to have a very large impact on cancer clinical trials. It will make a significant reduction in cost if we can replace or augment the radiologist doing confirmatory readings. Right now, there's a primary and then a confirmatory reading. The promise of this program is that AI will not only lower the cost of that confirmatory reading, it will shorten the time of the trials, and and everybody on the team believes that the logic of this would lead you to predict that the quality will be better as well. It will remove what is now some difficult discordance between the primary and secondary readers. Again, a breakout session today at 1:45, and you'll get to hear from the scientist who defined RECIST 1.1 and how he thinks it can and will be improved going forward. Something earlier in our pipeline is to get involved in cancer clinical research. We think we have some assets here where we can really make a unique contribution. And one of the things that's motivating us here really is the president's set aside of $500 million over 10 years to be focused on pediatric cancer research. The committee that is advising the NCI on how to spend that money has just reported to the NCI, and they emphasize things like data sharing and analytics and registries and automation, all the areas where our capabilities are growing. Our next step there is we have a meeting with 2 of the members of that committee that's advising the NCI. And finally, we've always had a strong relationship with FDA. Our research programs are inspired by conversations with the FDA. There's been some change in the leadership and structure at the Oncology Center of Excellence. Our dialogue with OCE is now sponsored or organized or led by Paul Klutz, and there are now 10 FDA staff who are in regular discussion with Project DataSphere and our committees on these programs. And one last thing on our FDA relationship, we have a contract with FDA for a series of symposia. The next one is Symposium 9, a virtual symposium on October 7th. The topic is rare tumor registries. So if you haven't already signed up, go on the PDS website. You'll find information about it. It's going to be a good one. Now, it's my pleasure to hand the baton to our founding CEO to give us an update on CEO Roundtable China, Dr. Marty Murphy.
Thank you so much, very much, Bill. And it's a delight to be back with everybody. I hope that you're going to be able to see the screen, and presuming you are, let me then just take a moment to give you a few of the key achievements of your CEO Roundtable in China. First of all, the background. Remember that our founder, President Bush, was the first envoy from the United States to the People's Republic of China. He and Barbara and their 5 children moved to Beijing in 1976, where they lived and worked for the next 2 years. But as with everything in the president's life, they made friends that endured for their life. And so it was years later when a question was posed to me by the boss on one of my quarterly meetings with him, reporting on the CEO Roundtable, and he asked the question, "Marty, what are we doing in China?" And I had to rather embarrassingly say, "Nothing." And he looked at me with that sidelong glance and said, "Well, I bet we'll get busy soon." And so it came to pass, and Chris Wiebacher is the one who can really tell this story, because it was under your administration, Chris, as worldwide head of Sanofi, that you also saw an opportunity and a need for your company in China, and you took us under your wing. And that year was 2012. And so it really started this enterprise called the CEO Roundtable China. There at that time, by the encouragement of the president and with the not just sponsorship, but guidance and support of Chris Wiebacher. Since then, the CEO Roundtable has become first in class NGO, and we're pleased you'll see in this first bullet that 2019's annual review was completed successfully, and this first in class NGO was relicensed for a renewal of 4 years by the central government. This has never before happened, and that is largely due to our chairman, Professor Wang Yu, who for the preceding 14 years had been the Director General of China's CDC. COVID-19 has had an enormous impact on the latter half of this year in which I'm reporting, and I'd be remiss were I not to acknowledge the gratitude that we have for a number of people. Bob Bradway. Bob, thank you for introducing us to Mike Roman of 3M. Member Tom Donahue, the head of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, introduced us to a number of important people. In particular, I want to sing out for UPS and others. What actually then took place was the first airlift of medical supplies on February the 2nd, that with a UPS MD-11 cargo jet filled with 44,000 pounds worth of PPE, gowns, face shields, gloves, and the all-important N95 respirators provided by 3M. That was flown into Wuhan from the United States. In fact, as Bob Bradway and I will remember, following it that night across the airspace of China as the only airplane in those skies, bringing for the first time to Wuhan, a city of 11 million people, that the 100,000 physicians and nurses there had not received any refreshment of their personal protective equipment, the supplies that kept them from the virus. They had not received any in more than a week. Those 100,000 physicians at the front line and nurses received their supplies for the first time. That brought us also under the aegis of Professor Chen Zhu, who Chris actually helped initiate again a meeting in 2012. He, of course, is, among other things, head of the Red Cross Society of China. So the Wellcome Trust, CEPI, the World Health Organization, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the World Economic Forum, and the Red Cross Society of China all participated, beginning there in January with the relief in February, and this continues to this very day. I'll have a moment to say at the very end about this. In addition, there's been a focus on mental health training in the campaign under the gold standard auspices of your CEO Roundtable in China. And this has been brought about largely by stakeholders at the World Health Organization and also Bree Biosciences. Dr. Ji Hong, formerly the head of infectious disease at GSK, started this biotech that is becoming one of its first in class in China, emphasizing mental health. And they're supporting this entire initiative throughout China of focusing on mental health training as part of the gold standard. In addition, we've been requested by the Boao Forum. It's China's version of Davos and the World Economic Forum to actually collaborate with the Global Health Forum, which you'll be hearing much more about, I'm sure, in the future, because it is leading the campaign for pandemic preparedness throughout Asia, and hopefully it will become integrated worldwide. Gold standard accreditation continues, and I'm just highlighting three large companies. who now are not only gold standard accredited, but also now pursuing global gold standard. J&J China is global gold standard accredited. Fohao, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in China, is also a gold standard. And now MSD R&D, known as that in China. Elsewhere, of course, it's known as Merck, is gold standard. One of the things that we also are very pleased with is that one of our patrons, in addition to Professor Chen Zhu being a patron, so also is the governor of Hainan, His Excellency Governor Shen Jiaoming. And in Hainan, that provincial government now is fully embracing the gold standard throughout all of its offices and will have, I believe, a far-reaching impact. Lastly, in this very quick cavalcade of activities over the past year, the CEO Roundtable in China was asked to lead the Shanghai National Cancer Prevention Promotion Week, and all of its tobacco-free campaigns. There are now 9 Tier 1 cities. Tier 1 cities are 10 million inhabitants and more, all of which are tobacco-free or smoke-free, and all of those, including Shanghai, have received that accreditation in large measure because of a support from a number of agencies, not the least of which has been your CEO Roundtable in China. And lastly, very recently, in fact, recently being defined as last week, I thought we would want to highlight, I would indeed, Secretary Andy Card, who's going to be introduced to us formally by our chairman later on. So I won't tread on your territory, Bob, but I would like to say that one of the things that the George and Barbara Bush Foundation asked was a hosting of a virtual program entitled Looking Forward, Avoiding a Vaccine Cold War. Looking Forward is the title of the president's first book, and Avoiding a Vaccine Cold War. Think of it as under his administration, the administration which Andy Card served as one of the secretaries in his cabinet. It was in his administration that the last Cold War ended. It did so because of multilateral capability of his great leadership. What we are tending towards in this troubled world of ours, with the pandemic raging essentially in most of the world, is a tendency towards nationalization of vaccines, which could easily lend itself to a vaccine Cold War. To avoid and avert that, the George and Barbara Bush Foundation, under the aegis of Andy Card, has asked a panel of meetings in which we've been gathering together some of the world's greats who are leading the world out of the abyss. And this first meeting was held last week. In fact, there is the URL. Anyone who would like, please either copy it down or drop me a note and I'll be happy to send it to you. It will actually bring you the 40-minute discussion that we were honored to convene. And it consisted of Sir Jeremy Farrar, the legendary director of the Wellcome Trust, the world's second largest biomedical innovator and supporter, second only to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Dr. Sumi Swaminathan is the chief scientist of the World Health Organization, one of the trinity that is responsible for the global stemming of the pandemic, and Dr. Richard Hatchett, the CEO of the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, known to us as CEPI. Here I pause and give you another salute, Chris, because Chris has been diligently every week working on the funding of CEPI, this Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, in terms of making sure that the investment of the billions, that's with a B, of dollars of investment that are going into the coalition and to Gavi are wisely and well spent, so that by this time next year, all things being equal, with the COVAX facility, of which Chris is one of the leaders, there will be a stemming of the overall pandemic by the end of 2021, because over 2 billion doses and 2 billion individuals, I should say, will have been inoculated. And at that rate, with those individuals on a triaged priority basis, we will be bringing true herd immunity to our world. And it must happen simultaneously throughout the entire world. All of that was made possible really because of the CEO Roundtable's founder, having the vision and the verve to recognize that we must not be unilateral, we must be collaborative. And so it is to Professor Wang Yu and Kevin Shi, Louise East, to Secretary Andy Carr and the great folks at the foundation, Jim McGrath, Doran Smith, and the irrepressible Chief of Staff, Gene Becker, that I say thank you. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to make this brief presentation.
Okay, thank you, Marty. I don't think President Bush would be surprised by the extraordinary work that you've led for us in China. And I do think he'd be proud to know that he spurred you and Chris and the CEO Roundtable to take the initiative in that important part of the world. So thank you, Marty, for your ongoing leadership of our efforts in China and for the extraordinary leadership you've provided, not just to our organization, but more broadly this year, leveraging decades of experience in China. And again, building off the boss, as you call him, building off his legacy as having been our country's first envoy to that nation. So thank you, Marty. It's time now to shift gears. It's time for us to recognize this year's winner of the Charles A. Sanders Life Science Award, or the Charlie, as we call it. And that, of course, is our annual award to the individual or organization that has been deemed to be bold and venturesome in innovation and collaboration in the area of clinical oncology research. The Charlie, of course, is named in honor of Dr. Charles A. Sanders, who is the former chairman of Glaxo and chairman of the Foundation of the National Institutes of Health. He, of course, is a physician scientist of great renown and has been the force behind a number of innovations that have improved and prolonged life. In fact, he helped throughout his career shape health education and medical research, including through his role as chief executive of the Massachusetts General Hospital. Dr. Sanders represents a kind of leadership and innovation, collaboration, and patient-centered commitment that the CEO Roundtable on Cancer advocates and seeks to replicate. Since the Charlie Award started in 2013, we've sought to honor that same spirit in individuals and organizations involved in the fight against cancer. Last year, we posthumously recognized our founder, President George H.W. Bush, and Dr. Martin J. Murphy, who helped bring the CEO Roundtable on Cancer to life as its first and longstanding chief executive officer. We also honored the Emerson Collective for their support of cancer research and treatment. This year, we recognize Merck KGaA with the 2020 Charles A. Sanders Life Sciences Award. Merck KGaA has been part of the CEO Roundtable on Cancer since 2012 and has been a Cancer Gold Standard accredited company since 2011. In 2017, Merck KGaA partnered with Project Datasphere to establish the Global Oncology Big Data Alliance. And the whole purpose of this alliance is to fuel important collaborations in oncology, data science, and regulatory policy. And the aim of this alliance is to give us many new chances to accelerate treatments to oncology patients who need them. Members of the Merck KGaA team are engaged closely in this work, which is focused on rare tumor registries, immune-related adverse events, and the data sharing platform operated by Project Datasphere. Merck KGaA really exemplifies the level and degree of involvement and collaboration that benefits us all. We have a video from Dr. Belén Garrijo, who's the Vice Chairman of the Executive Board and Deputy CEO of Merck KGaA. Unfortunately, Dr. Garrijo had a conflict and couldn't join us today live, but I would extend our thanks and congratulations to the others from Merck KGaA who are online with us now. But before we see the video from Belén, our prior chairman, Chris Wiebacher, has a few words to share from Dr. Sanders himself.
Thank you,
I think
Bob.
Charlie would approve.
Let me just echo all the great things that you've said about Dr. Charlie Sanders. You know, since our establishment in 2001, the CEO Roundtable has brought together key leaders in all aspects of government, business, not-for-profits, to collaborate on one goal, to focus on cancer patients and to eliminate this terrible disease. And so it was great to have this award established 7 years ago to recognize individuals and organizations that go above and beyond in working towards this goal. Merck Germany has certainly earned this award for their support in partnership with Project Datasphere, as Bob has outlined, in gathering data focusing on those patients with rare cancers, providing hope for patients who don't fall into the more well-known and recognized diagnoses. This is exactly the collaboration and progress that was envisaged, and it is needed to help the CEO Roundtable work towards their goal of helping all cancer patients worldwide. Unity is critical, especially in these days, and it is essential if we are going to be successful in helping humankind. So now let's hear from a tremendous leader and my dear friend, Dr. Belén Garrijo, Vice Chairman of the Executive Board and Deputy CEO of Merck KGaA.
Hello there. Here I am with Charlie, which is as tall as I am. And what a wonderful honor it is for Merck KGaA Darmstadt, Germany, to be named this year's recipient of the Charles A. Sanders Life Science Award. And the honor is heightened because this recognition represents the leadership of your founder, President George H.W. Bush, and the commitment to innovation and collaboration that have been the hallmarks of Dr. Charles A. Sanders, after whom the award is named. Since we first became Gold Standard accredited in 2011 and CEO Roundtable members the following year, we have been truly inspired by the global impacts of this extraordinary enterprise dedicated by the President to forever be bold and venturesome. And in keeping the President's mission, we were proud to be invited by your founding CEO, my dearest Marty Murphy, to devote energy and resources toward collecting and analyzing the rare cancers that, when looked upon in aggregate, represents the world's largest cancer population. And it is on behalf of these patients who are so often underserved by clinical investigations that we joined Project Datasphere and co-founded the Global Oncology Big Data Alliance that was jointly launched back in 2017. So this global alliance in oncology is bringing together multidisciplinary teams in oncology, data science, and regulatory policy who are advancing our pledge to accelerate the discovery and the development of improved therapies for all cancer patients who are awaiting new hope and increasing confidence through new discovery. Please know how proud we are to receive the 2020 Charlie and how grateful we are to the CEO Roundtable's board and chairman who have singled Merck KGaA out of so many worthy candidates. We will proudly display this award as a symbol of our enduring commitment to improving the outcomes and therefore the lives of all cancer patients, regardless of the diagnosis. Thank you so much.
So I want to thank and congratulate Merck KGaA. I really do want to thank them for their support, and which includes a great partnership as we go forward in doing the work through Project DataSphere. Also want to prepare you for this afternoon's sessions, the virtual sessions that will be coming up. We will be kicking this off again at 12:30 with Chairman Bradway, and then Bob Ingram will be sharing his insight into the President's Cancer Panel and his role there. So please join us back at 12:30. Then we have breakout sessions that do split into Project DataSphere work as well as the CEO Roundtable work. These sessions are just the beginning. Let me just do that as a teaser. These will be deeper in discussion, but they will be followed up in the next 6 to 9 months with more sessions that will go deeper into the work, and we look forward to your participation, your insight, and sharing your thoughts with us as we move forward. I think, like I said in my opening comments, without your support, your guidance, we wouldn't be where we are today. So I really appreciate the membership and everything you've done. I do want to remind you, as these sessions come up, please share this within your own organization because anybody within your organization can be with these breakout sessions and these follow-up sessions too. So we really do look forward to that. Last, I do want to thank the staff within the CEO Roundtable and Project DataSphere. These first 9 months have been quite unique. I was able to spend at least 10 weeks with them face-to-face before we went virtual. And I really am amazed at the work that we're still able to get done. Our clinical partners, we know they've been taken away with the regular clinical work with COVID, but have been engaged with us in moving things forward, and we really thank you for that. Last, I want to give you one perspective in regards to our talent. As I was looking at our org chart, it's only 16 people, but it seems like it's a lot more. 75% of our people have been with the CEO Roundtable or Project DataSphere for 1 year or less. But that energy is there, and we're really moving forward as we gather momentum with this very talented group. So to close out, I want to move this back to Chairman Bradway for adjournment, and any other comments?
Okay, thank you, Andy. We can stand adjourned now, and we will reconvene at 12:30 East Coast time for our afternoon sessions. So thank you all for joining us for the first portion of our annual meeting, and I look forward to seeing you back in just under half an hour. Thank you.